and I'm joined here in the studio now by Temitope Kolade, who is a tax analyst. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Happy Eid. Supposed to be a public holiday, I believe, in the coming days, I think tomorrow and next. But sure. People are sick of holidays at this point, I believe.
Apparently.
I think we've been at home for 2+ months, give or take, depending on where you are in the country. How are these holidays, which are still going to have to happen anyways, going to affect businesses, you know, because people are still trying to get back into the groove of things, and now we'll have another 2 days where we still have to stay home. There are people who are saying, do we still need any more holidays this year? What do you think about that?
Whether we need more holidays this year, I would say we don't, because if businesses are supposed to do very well, we know that we've got to work very hard to ensure that things get back to normal for the rest of the year. If they would get back to normal at the least. Already we know that the aviation industry is grounded completely. The hospitality sector of the economy is also grounded. Nobody is staying in the hotels. So when you think about it, really, by the time we think we're getting out of this, that's when we'll probably be picking up the pieces, the crumbles, and that'll be no time for holidays.
Yeah. Speaking of, tax, and a lot of countries have tried to implement, sort of palliative measures, especially for small businesses, because they have been probably the most affected by all of this. You find that, like I said at the top of the show, a lot of businesses probably will never open up again because they couldn't survive 2 months without any revenue. People have been laid off left, right, and center. There was a whole statistic I saw earlier today or yesterday about the aviation industry, which is probably the most hit, like you said. A lot of people have cut thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of staff, But for small businesses, and Nigeria is basically run by small businesses, whether we like it or not. Yes, the big banks and other companies are there, but the average Nigerian is doing business, is trading, and there doesn't seem to be a feeling that they are going to be helped in the long run. What are you getting from that?
I'll step back a bit and say, are the small businesses the only ones that have been affected by the situation at hand? And the big answer to that is a capital no. And the reason is this. The multinationals are also affected. Think about the oil industry, for instance. At the beginning of the year, the government had estimated that a barrel of oil would be sold for $57 per barrel. But so today, the budget is being revised to $25 per barrel. Yeah. That means the oil sector has been impacted as well. And if you think about the fact that that's the mainstay for Nigeria's economy, it's then a big deal for us. If you think about small business, informal sector, and you think about the fact that they are the ones that do most of these things, and they're the ones that run the business, again, you step back and say, how much taxes do they pay? Because there is a big debate about how the informal sector is not really being taxed. So most of the taxes that we see collected as at today in Nigeria is coming from the multinationals, from the big companies, and there are various categories of taxes, by the way. You talk about the transaction taxes based on the transactions, such as the value-added tax. You talk about the income tax that comes at the end of the year when you have done all of your transaction. And that's to say whether you have profit or not, then we realize and say, let's see whether you have taxes to pay. If you're in a loss position, then there is no tax to pay. So if there are transaction taxes, for instance, and you see what the Finance Act 2019, for instance, did for the informal sector, that have less than 25 million transactions for a year, is that they don't even have to pay VAT, for instance. They don't even have to account for VAT. So at the moment, in terms of the contribution of that sector to tax collection in Nigeria, there is not so much.
So you talk about the big organizations now, and even I think in the United States, there's even a lot of tax breaks that have been discussed with regards to a lot of this manufacturing, especially because they employ bulk of the labor there. Is that something that you think we should be looking at here? Because people are saying, it always seems like this 7.5 increase in tax, basically, is now looks so ill-timed because it came on right before the pandemic broke out.
Well, let's start with talking about the 7.5 VAT. And what I would say is that it's not exactly ill-timed. And the reason is this. If you think about it, it's when the government also came with that increase in VAT, what they tried to do was to exempt certain things that are essential products, essential items. For instance, basic food items are exempt from VAT completely. Baby products are exempted. So when you look at that, you would say, hey, really, people should still be able to feed, people should still be able to do basic things without necessarily having to incur that additional tax. So it's more on the big transactions, the transactions that maybe they are not exactly essential, but they are important for the economy to run as well, and people would have to engage in those transactions for us to have an economy that is going. Yeah, now flip it back and see what the US has done or what other developed countries have done. You then need to look at the funding model for Nigeria and think about the fact that we have the non-oil, the oil sector, and of course, borrowings or debts that help to fund the activities of the economy. If oil have been badly hit, you think about non-oil, which is basically tax and custom duties and maybe funds or levies by ministries, agencies, and departments. You then left with really nothing. You left with borrowing. Back in 2012, when the Paris Club and the London Club waived debt for Nigeria, we came to about $4.1 billion of debt. But as of today, as at the last quarter of 2019, we had hit $27 billion. Now, the IMF just said giving us another $3.5 billion. So we're going over $30 billion. So when we then think about the revenue to debt ratio of Nigeria, revenue to debt ratio is bad for us. So indeed, if you're going to fund the economy, if you're going to move forward, tax still have to be collected. Yeah. The question would then be who pays the tax? And it has to be businesses that are doing well, definitely. So if businesses are not doing well, all of the stakeholders, the businesses, the government have to sit together and ensure that the business do well or the businesses do well such that there is tax to collect because it's a circular flow and there has to be an equilibrium.
All right. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we'll look at the possibilities of... let's go on. I want to talk about personal income tax now because it's human beings who are affected, ultimately. Yes, businesses are affected, but human beings are ultimately the ones who are feeling the pain. Is there any possibility that that could be considered, looking at the Nigerian who pays tax and saying, okay, for a certain period? Because I think a few Scandinavian countries are doing that where they're giving 3-4 months break. Say, okay, you know what, no charges, no taxes on anything you're earning until a certain... maybe when the economy starts to look healthy again. Yeah,
nothing is really impossible. It's possible to say we're waiving personal income tax. But again, you ask yourself, when we waive that, how will the government be funded? Yes. If you look at the Lagos state government, for instance, and you say how much is being collected in taxes, it's probably the best of all. If you look at the recent reports, you see that Lagos state government has IGR of about 400 billion naira, rather. Yes. Not even up to $1 trillion. And then you think about other states that are doing as low as 8 billion naira. So that's a far cry. Yeah, annually. And that's really not good for us. Okay. And you see that the states are basically, because again, personal income tax goes to the states. And so the states still go cap in hand every month to the federal government. So if you say, don't collect taxes at all anymore, it will then be like you want to ground everything. And we'll be living on borrowings altogether as a nation.
So you think the emphasis is more on the fact that government needs these funds to sort of trigger the economy much more than the individual?
Yeah, they need it. And then the individuals, as long as they continue to earn, should be able to pay some tax. Because again, if you don't earn, you can't pay taxes. But if you earn, you should be able to pay a bit for the income to be redistributed, because that's one of the tools that tax serves for us, is a redistribution. So some people earn so much. And the personal income tax is a graduated scale, for instance. So it's really the much that you earn. For instance, if you earn $1 million, probably you have to pay about 200,000 naira as tax. So if you earn just 100,000 naira, you pay, it's proportional, so to speak. So you don't have to pay much more than you have to really, much more than you have earned. Yeah. So I would say, yeah, when you earn, still pay that much and let it be redistributed, because you need to think about the vulnerable, those who don't even have at all, those who don't earn at all, those who are not employed at all.
Something you said, touched on earlier that I want to come back to a bit. You talked about oil prices and how, I mean, it's whether we like it or not, it's what we, it's our oil,
Yeah.
literally,
Yeah.
in Nigeria is what we run on. And a lot of the companies here, the multinationals, how do we work around having them to still be here to do business healthily after a pandemic like this, and the government still being able to earn from the revenue that oil, however meager it still is, I guess my question is it possible for these multinationals to stay here and not get a tax break and still do well in
Very,
the oil sector?
very possible. Very
Because
possible.
most people won't be, I know a lot of Nigerians see the oil sector as this one place where
Yeah.
they should never be helped.
Yeah, very, very possible
Yeah.
for them to not to get help and still stay.
Yeah.
And it's a question of why do companies diversify? Why do they divest? Why do they have to leave the country? If you think about a company like a Shell, for instance, they've been thinking about...
Actually, you know what? Let's just go on a break. When we come back, we'll expand on that and much more, talking about taxes and businesses in Nigeria in the COVID-19 era. Please stay with us. All right, welcome back. Before the break, I was talking with Temitope Kolade, and we're talking about the oil industry and tax exemptions, and you were going to say?
Yeah, I was saying, when you think about a Shell, for instance, for a number of years now, they've been trying to diversify from just oil and gas to power. And which sector of power now is the renewable subsector. Yeah. So that's one thing they've been trying to do. And if you think about the fact that businesses would not just stop running, they will, when they want to divest, it takes a while. So they're not going to say because things are not fine right now, they're going to then just drop the ball and leave. So they have to be in it for a while. The question would then be, there are other projects in the pipeline. Are they ready to take those projects forward because of the situation of things? Because the assumptions, the underlying assumptions as at the time they were getting into those projects are failing and they're changing. So that's the point where there is a need to sit back with all of the stakeholders, the shareholders of the company, and say, hey, can we continue this way? And of course, the government then needs to think about, do we need to give them some tax break? Do we need to reduce the tax rate for them? Government is thinking about some marginal bid rounds that will be coming up soon. And when people get into marginal bids, they have to pay its 5% tax on whatever revenue. So that means there is, say, a 15% that is left, and that's not exactly so because there are other deductions. So do we still keep it at 85%, or is there a way to redesign the tax system for that kind of field such that people are still profitable here and they're still interested in doing business? We're
going to continue the tax conversation because whenever I talk tax, like I told you when we're off air, my chest gets tight. But I'm still a good citizen.